So, dear brothers and sisters, on this feast day of Saint Don Bosco, it's good to reflect a little on why he became a saint at all. That's how the saints then can become an example to us, how to behave, how to act, how to react, how to think. So, he was born in 1815 into Turin, an area of Italy which had been absolutely ravaged by the Napoleonic Wars. So a lot of the men had died. There was great poverty. Also at that time there was both a drought and crop failure. So when he was born, it was a miserable existence. So his family struggled greatly, and yet he noticed that his mom was always generous with the poor. So with those who might come around to their family home, knock on the door, and they were evidently starving, they'd share what they had. So little Giovanni saw that life isn't just about us and our needs and taking care of ourselves, that our love causes us to move out of ourselves and serve the others. His mom was a wonderful lady. She too actually has been beatified, if I remember correctly. So a very saintly woman, very, very prayerful. So he had a tender heart, a good heart, a prayerful heart, and felt drawn to God, drawn to prayer. He had this vivid dream once where he saw a bunch of young men playing, but using foul language, cursing at each other. And amongst them, he saw this majestic man and a beautiful lady who said to him, with gentleness and meekness, you will win them. You will understand when the time comes. So he felt this need always to help those who were suffering, not just from poverty, because exterior poverty isn't actually the greatest evil. The greatest evil is the loss of the soul. So he went on to become a priest. His brother was not too happy about it because they needed farm hands at home, farm labourers at home to pay for all of the family's needs. Instead, Giovanni had to go off and learn. He had to study, he had to become a priest. So his brother was not happy. Apparently whipped him with disgust. But he went off and he became a priest, ordained at 26, and started to serve in Turin. And he saw great numbers of young men in the city, again, trying to make ends meet after numerous wars, in poverty, lots of crime and injustice on the streets. Then also young men who would get jobs would have been mistreated in their places of work. So either they'd be asked to do very menial jobs, they'd be maybe given no pay, they'd be beaten, and if any of them complained, good luck, I'll get someone else. So there was great injustice at the time as well, which Father Bosco fought against. So he would establish contracts. So obviously a lot of these young lads couldn't read or write. So he would write a contract for them, between them then and the employer, that you can't be beaten, you get your holidays, and your job is this and not everything else. So there was like formal contracts for workers. It was kind of revolutionary at the time. So when it comes to his service then of the poor, his service especially of young men, he was greatly inspired, or more driven, by visiting prisons and seeing the deplorable state that many young men found themselves in. And he said, we have to stop this. Because once they get in there, once they go into prison, and they're just surrounded by other men who fall in similarly, and then it just becomes like a high school of criminality, as opposed to a place of reform. Now these prisoners have all sorts of other contacts with other criminals, and it just makes things infinitely worse. They're let out and they fall into a life crime if they haven't been involved already. So he wanted to stop men getting there in the first place. So he set up the Salesians, as we now know them, a group of men who would try to help these young men from falling into a life of crime. When he was young, he saw a group of street performers. When he was a teenager, he saw a group of street performers, and how, again, they had no TV back in the day, how young people then would flock to see them juggling and walking on tight ropes and backflips and whatever else. So he thought, wow, Maybe I could learn some of these things. So he paid attention to what they were doing, and he practiced, and he practiced, and he practiced. He tied a rope between two trees, and he'd walk along it, and he practiced. And then he'd start doing these kind of things himself, doing these little street performances. And, of course, the kids would all gather around, after which he would recount the homily that he had just heard the previous Sunday to them and explain the gospel. So he saw how we can use fun, we can use games to evangelize. And this then was what he brought into his priesthood, this idea of meeting people where they're at. You can share their lives with them, just not sin, but you can share their lives with them. You can have fun with them, you can laugh, but bring them to Jesus. It's this divine gaze which Don Bosco had so beautifully. I think that this is maybe what we can focus on today for ourselves. Try to see people with the eyes of Jesus and love people with the heart of Jesus. To see people with the eyes of Jesus. So this is that wonderful expression we've meditated a few times here. But there go I, but for the grace of God. When you see someone who has fallen into fallen off the wagon in some way, they've fallen into some sort of addiction, or they don't practice, or whatever it is. There go I, but for the grace of God. I mean, if I had grown up in a different family, in a different place, I could be exactly like them, or worse. There go I, but for the grace of God. So the Lord wants me to see them through his eyes, to see people through the eyes of the Lord. So when you see people who've fallen, what's the Lord's reaction? Or when you see people who, just for you, are just annoying, people who eat with their mouth open, the most irritating sound, right? Or people who everything they do is noisy, right? They breathe noisy, they walk noisy, they close doors noisy. Or people who don't fold towels properly, or don't wash up, dry up, sweep the floor properly. People who are just, they sleep noisy. People who everything they do just irritates you. Okay. Ask the Lord to see them through his eyes and to love them with his heart. Keep in mind every person who surrounds you, every person you've ever seen, the Lord believes is worth dying for. He believes they're worth dying for, and he has actually done so. So any person who you find challenging or difficult, or any person who's actually properly hurt you, the Lord has suffered and died for them too. So, little parenthesis, they say in Italian, a little side point. If someone has hurt us in our lives, when we see them through the eyes of the Lord and love them with his heart, it doesn't mean that we allow ourselves to be a doormat, where you just go back and allow yourself to be hurt again or abused again or whatever it is. Of course not. You have the right and maybe even the duty to defend yourself or to keep away from people who might harm you. But generally speaking, in our lives, that's not the case. But we're called to see everyone with the Lord's eyes and love everyone with his heart. And this is hard. This is hard. It sounds easy, and it sounds all kind of, romantic, and, St. Teresa of Lisieux, let's just skip through the fields and it'll all be great. But this is actually really interiorly demanding. Because when someone is annoying, inside your head, you might just be thinking, I'd just love to smack him. Or I'd love if they, in fact, what I would do to fix them now is I would do this, and then they need to that. And if it all worked out and you've all planned, and your head's busy and full of ideas, and it's trying to solve the problem, instead of just loving the person the way they are. And often you can't change a person anyway. If you're in a position of responsibility, maybe you can make some sort of a recommendation, but generally speaking, you can't change people. You can't. So working it all out in your head is futile. Waste of time. So we will have to learn to see them through his eyes and love them with his heart. And this is the best use of our time. In our gospel today, Jesus uses a number of parables, and then he finishes with this line where he says, he explained everything to his disciples when they were alone. He explained everything to his disciples when they were alone. And again, applying that to us. If we want to understand the Lord's heart, if we want to understand how to love another person with his heart, how to see another person with his eyes, we need to spend time with him, so that he can form us, lead us, grant us the grace to overcome our own thoughts, our own desires, our own plans, our own sense of justice, overcome all of that, and just love the other person. We need the Lord to do it, and he will explain this to us when we are alone with him. So we ask the Lord today, through the prayers and intercession of St. Don Bosco, to renew our eyes and renew our hearts, that we can see others with his eyes and love others with his heart. Amen.